Hi, we're going to kick things off here. My name is Ala. This is Objection, Your Honor, RC. I had to think for a second because 1L is starting to get on top of me a little bit. If I seem out of it at all, please, you can blame my professors. Don't blame me. So this class is all about trying to do the two big things in RC that you're being asked to do. The first is to understand what's going on, like just take it in and be like, okay, so this is what you care about. This is why you care about it. This is the story that you're telling me. And then the second part of it is to defend your understanding of the passage and the questions. All right. Both parts, I think, are relatively equally important, although the first step, which is to understand the passage, is necessary to get to the second step. Not sufficient, right? Just because you understand doesn't mean you're going to just waltz through the questions. That's not how it works. But you do need the first part. You do need to understand what's going on in order to be able to attack the answer choices when you get to the questions. We also try to do a little bit of a personality shift in between reading and in between answering the questions. The idea is that when you're reading the passage, you don't have your guard up. You're just trying to let the words like wash over you. You're just trying to understand what it is that they're talking about. In the questions themselves, though, we change it up a little bit. We're going to have our guard up. More than that, we're going to have like all our weapons in our hands and be like trying to fight off the answer choices. We're going to be like proactive. We're going to be aggressive, preemptively aggressive against answer choices because we're going to make predictions. We're going to know what we're looking for, or at the very least, you're going to have your main point in your mind, right? You're like, I know what the author wrote about, and I'm not going to pick something that goes directly against the author's main point. And it doesn't even matter what the question type is at that point. So all of this is to say that RC comes in that two-step process, right? Of let's break down the passage, let's understand what's happening, and then let's shift over to 4 answers, y'all. 4 answers in every question are like batshit crazy. They're horrible. And your job is to not pick those. And that's the idea behind the title of the class, which is Objection, Your Honor, which is every time an answer choice is wrong, you're like, Objection, Your Honor, that's stupid. That's not what my client said. Client being the passage. And then you eliminate that answer choice. So that's the exercise we're going to do today. Any other questions about what I just said or specifically about the class? Okay, great. Here's the link for the passage for today. We're going to read this together, if that's cool with you guys. We're going to read this in an interactive style. For those of you that have been in my class before, I apologize for repeating myself. What that means is I'm going to read a sentence or a phrase to you. I'm going to like read through the passage out loud and I'll pause, usually after every sentence. And I'm like, you know, if Selena's reading with me, I'm going to be like, Selena, what do you think just happened in this sentence? And then Selena will tell me like, okay, well, I think this was an example. I think this is actually part of the author's opinion. We're just going to have a conversation about what's going on. The reason we do it this way is because I haven't yet found a better way to show students or to teach students exactly what it is they need to be doing on a passage, because it's really hard to slow down. I'm not going to lie. It's extremely hard to slow down, especially with the American public school system, that where you're just taught to kind of just like, I don't even know, not even read. It's more like just put it through your machine and just kind of like get out whatever you can out of it. When you've been taught to read like that, this kind of reading does not come naturally, which is why you have to force yourself to have a conversation. So that's why we read the way we do in my classes, is to try to give you guys like some kind of inspiration to draw on. Like, okay, what would like Ala say here? Like, this seems like an opinionated sentence. Like, what kind of follow-up question should I be asking? And I want to be honest with you guys, I don't prep for these classes. I don't like read the passage before and like plan the questions I'm going to ask. I don't do that. First of all, I do not have the time to do that for these classes. Honest to God, I don't. But more importantly, the reason why I don't is because I want you guys to see that this is just an off the cuff type of thing, right? I want you guys to just be inspired by whatever you're inspired by. If examples come to your mind, talk about those examples. If they don't, just be like, I don't see the point of this, but I do get what the author cares about. Does that make sense? We saying that? Okay, good. All right. So we've got one, ooh, we got little paragraphs. One, two, three. We'll do about 3 volunteers, I think. A volunteer for the first paragraph, volunteer for these middle 2, and then a volunteer for these last 2. So who wants to take on the first paragraph?
I can do it.
Awesome, Charles,
Actually,
and then Peter, I'll come to you for the middle 2, I think, that I was talking about. Awesome. How are you doing, Charles?
I'm doing good. I'm doing
All
good.
right, ready?
Yep.
Many birds that form flocks compete through aggressive interaction for priority of access to resources such as food and shelter. What do you think they're getting at there?
Um, these birds pretty much they fight for resources. They fight for yeah, access to resources and whatnot.
Yeah, and we're thinking about like birds that form flocks.
Wow.
What kind of birds might they be?
Uh, what kind of birds might they be? I don't
Yeah, like any kind of bird maybe that you can think of that like lives in a flock or forms flocks.
well, I'm not well versed on the birds out there, but
Yeah, me neither. I'm trying to think of like a bird like flock situation, but basically we're thinking about birds in a big group, right, Charles? It
right,
doesn't even
right.
matter if we can't think of an actual bird. But got it. Just a bunch of birds that are like together. All right, they're going to be aggressive. They're going to fight for resources. Awesome. The result of repeated interactions between flock members is that each bird gains a particular social status related to its fighting ability, with priority of access to resources increasing with higher status.
Hmm,
Wow.
interesting. Yeah, I mean, it's just saying at that point that like these birds who are in these flocks and competing for resources, as they compete with each other, you know, as one wins, they sort of move up the social hierarchy um, within that flock.
Yep. They basically have like a leaderboard.
Yeah, king of the hill.
Yeah, they do. They have a King of the Hill leaderboard. So the more like, fighting brownie points they get, the more sort of access they have to like resources. Damn, that's wild. I wouldn't have guessed that from just knowing that, birds flock. Okay. As the number and intensity of interactions between birds increase, however, so increase the costs to each bird in terms of energy expenditure, time, and risk of injury.
Mm, okay. So while there's a cost of, while there is a benefit of moving up the social hierarchy, there's also the added negative effects that come with it.
Right. So if you climb the leaderboard, you still are spending time and energy and all of these things. So that's like you're lowering something else in order to climb up the leaderboard.
Mm,
Okay. Thus, birds possessing attributes that reduce the number of costly interactions in which they must be involved without a reduction in status are at an advantage.
okay. So pretty much these birds, as they move up the ladder board, if the birds who have certain like qualities that allow them to pretty much mitigate the negative aspects of it without necessarily impacting their status on their place on the hierarchy board, they're at an advantage pretty much.
Right. So let's say there's 2 birds. One of them, is a lot less prone to injury than the other one. Which one would be the one that has the advantage in terms of climbing the leaderboard?
Yeah, the one with the who's not prone to the injuries and whatnot.
Not prone to injuries. And these might sound like obvious questions to you guys, including Charles, be like, all like, why are we repeating stuff that like already makes sense in our head? It's because the questions aren't necessarily going to just ask you like simply what are the sentences saying. Even when you think something's like obvious, just force yourself to talk about it in your head. Force yourself to go like, okay, like why might this matter? Right? Or like, well, what does it mean? Like which kind of bird would do better than another kind of bird? right? What we're doing is we're manifesting the things that the passage is talking about in examples, analogies, conversations, whatever works for you. But when you force yourself to put it into your own words, you're going further than the passage. You're not going further than the passage. You're putting the passage into a structure, into a story, so that when you get to the questions, you know exactly what to do with it, because we have to be active, not passive, as we're doing this. And then the last sentence says, an external signal, such as a plumage type, announcing fighting ability and thereby obviating the need, the actual need to fight, could be one such attribute.
Oh, okay. So it's like, okay, so these birds who are in these positions who, to move up and down the ladder board, if they have something such as a plumage type, I'm not really sure what a plumage type is, but I don't really think
Mhm.
it matters, at least at this point. Um, if they have this plumage type sort of announce their fighting ability, so so they don't necessarily need to, engage in the activity that would, lead to worse outcomes and stuff like that.
Right. And we don't need to know what a plumage type is. No need to know. But we do know that what it's associated with, right? Which is basically, it's like a little, like you're holding up a sign that goes, I'm really good at fighting. Don't bother fighting with me.
Right.
Right. So when you have that sign up, you actually just like have that attribute. So maybe you can even go up the rankings without having the actual need to fight. Okay.
Exactly.
We've gone through the first paragraph, Charles. Do we have really any indication of what the author cares about, or do you have any predictions about what this passage might be, written for or about?
There's not so much indication about, like, I don't really know exactly where, like, the passage is going as of yet. I know predictions. I know I can make some predictions, particularly about, maybe plumage type isn't. Maybe the person is going to go on to talk about how plumage type, even though it could be such an attribute, maybe it's not so as useful as we think it is, or it might go on to talk about some studies, maybe affirming that it is such an attribute, or something like that. But I don't know. So those are just some, like, explanations or predictions.
No, those are great predictions. And I want you to know that it's not, the goal isn't to be right here. The goal is just to send those feelers out in your brain. That's what I call them. I call them little feelers. And you send them out in your brain to be like, okay, well, these are the variations in which things could go. Right. And you might be wrong about all of them. That's not the point. The point is to do it anyway, because what you're gonna be doing is offering yourself an opportunity to go, oh, okay. Well, either it's gonna work like this or it's gonna work like that, or these 10 other ways. You might be wrong, you might be right, but that doesn't matter. You are creating associations with the passage. You're asking the right questions. You're forcing yourself to have the conversation. At the end of the day, that is the winner. It's not about being right or wrong. Awesome. Charles, you did a great job reading. Thank you for volunteering.
No problem. Thank you.
Peter, are you ready?
Yeah, I was just busy looking at the chat. I'm surprised to know that Rich actually knew that, or did he Google it? Because
Yeah, I,
that's
I did
crazy.
I did know that, but I always pretend I don't know. Well, no, I don't always pretend, but I try to, whenever I do know the word, I just go along pretending that I
Yeah.
don't know the word, because I just want to demonstrate to students that knowing the words is not what's going to get you where you're trying to go.
Yeah, I was just going off Spain. It's basically it's just some attribute that helps these
Yeah,
guys not have to
yeah,
fight.
yeah.
Um, so
Yep.
yeah.
Awesome. You ready?
Yeah.
The zoologist Rover, I think that's how you say it, doesn't matter, asserted that plumage variations in Harris sparrows support the status signaling hypothesis.
Oh, okay. So now we're kind of building off this plumage idea that we were talking about, and then we have this new I guess zoologist saying that this plumage action actually supports um, this hypothesis he or is already happening. This original hypothesis or one that he built is supporting it. So what's
Yeah. Um, do we know what the hypothesis is about already?
um, signaling? That's
Yeah.
really it.
I
Kind of
mean,
like this.
what about the last sentence of the first paragraph, the one we were reading with Charles? Like, I think we got some more information about what this might be.
Yeah, I guess like signaling like their advantages, like their ability to fight, that you don't have to deal with me kind of thing.
Yep, love it. He reported that almost without exception, birds with darker throats win conflicts with individuals having lighter plumage.
Okay, so if you have a darker throat, then that's an advantage of that's the advantage that they're talking about in terms of fighting. Like if I have a darker throat, you're not gonna mess with me if you have a lighter throat
Yep.
kind of thing.
And I want to make a note for everyone that did not know what plumage was. In this sentence, you could have figured it out, right? Because we're talking about darker and lighter, and you'd be like, okay, some part of the bird is darker or lighter. And we're talking about their throats, and we know birds have feathers. You put two and two together, it's got something to do with their feathers. So never fear if you don't know what a word is or what a term means, you will be fine. All right. I think that's exactly right, Peter. He goes on, he claimed that even among birds of the same age and sex, the amount of dark plumage predicts relative dominance status.
Okay, so here he's just like kind of, I guess, defending maybe an objection, saying, what if it's these birds are like older and stronger, something like that. He's like, no, if they're the same, like it's it's the darkness that gives them that feature.
Yeah. Now, just like from our LR brain, we've got a correlation, right, Peter? We've got the birds with the throats, and then we've got them, doing well in fights. Do we know that that's a definite connection?
No, it could be that they're stronger.
It
They
could be
just
that they're
have
stronger, right?
all
Maybe the
dark.
dark plumage is associated with something else that helps. We're still like, we want that connection to be like really made.
Yeah, he's kind of just saying it supports its hypothesis, which would be that correlation causation, but he hasn't really given us a reason to, it could be that's not like certain, could be the other way around kind of thing.
Right?
So we'll see, I guess.
However, Rover's data do not support his assertions. In one of his studies, darker birds won only 57 out of 75 conflicts. Within another, focusing on conflicts between, oh wait, I think this is another study. But let's pause here and ask ourselves, like, what do you think the author's setting up right now?
Well, he's setting up to reject Rower's, kind of hypothesis here. I don't know if I'm going too deep about this already, but the darker birds won only 57 out of 75. I mean, that's more than half.
Yeah.
Is that not? So I'm kind of like skeptical, but I don't want to just shut it out already because I'm like, that's more than half. It's still like they're winning.
Yeah, they're
Um,
still winning. I'm not sure why the only is there.
yeah, I'm like,
Yeah.
that's not like a bad stat for these birds.
Nope.
Um,
You don't have to turn your brain off there, right, Peter? Like you're
yeah,
thinking about things that you would normally think about. Wait, like that sounds kind of good. Like what's wrong here? So
yeah. So I'm gonna
awesome.
keep both in mind. Like, he's authors rejecting this guy's data hypothesis, but at the same time, he just brought up a stat that like kind of like almost barely strengthens the guy's data, saying they're fighting
Yep.
more. But I'm not gonna go that far yet. I'm just gonna keep it in mind. So
Yep. Within another, and I think we're talking about another study, focusing on conflicts between birds of the same age group or sex, darker birds won 63 and lost 62.
okay, so in a different study, the percentage went down to almost 50-50 in regards to same sex and same age. So if it was a group of 25-year-old, where we're talking about birds, 25-year-old guys, it was 50-50. When before we were just looking at darker, it was 57-75, high
Yep.
percentage. Okay, so percentage is going down.
Right. When
Okay,
you
still
adjust
50-50.
Yep. When you adjust for age and sex, you're like, oh, they're winning 50% of the time, losing 50% of the time. That doesn't sound very compelling to me. There are indications that plumage probably does signal broad age-related differences in status among Harris sparrows. Adults usually usually dark-throated, have higher status than juveniles, who are usually light-throated.
Okay, so is it basically just saying that the older you get, the darker you have?
I think so. They're saying like the adults
So
are like ones who usually have the dark
yeah,
throats.
so then I mean you could assume that the older they get, the stronger you get, right?
Yeah, or the
So
more
I mean,
experienced you are at fighting.
yeah, experience too. Like I'm old, but I have no fighting experience, so uh
Yeah,
yeah, I'm just
no,
gonna go with
aging me would not help with my fighting ability.
I
That
would
would
have a very light
do nothing for
throughout
my
this
chances.
situation. I'd have a big flag over my head saying, "Stay away from me," because I don't want to fight.
Yeah,
But
basically.
yeah, I'm just kind of going off saying, yeah, the older they get, the darker you get. So that means it's probably, yeah, that it's more. I think the author's kind of saying it's more in terms of, you're getting older and you're getting stronger and you're getting more experience, kind
Mm,
of thing.
yeah. So, and then it says, and the sentence ends with, moreover, juveniles died to assemble adults are dominant over undied juveniles.
Juveniles died to resemble adults are dominant over undied juveniles. Are they talking about like dyeing their feathers or
I think they
yeah,
are. I mean, the spelling implies that.
yeah. Juvenile dyed to resemble adults are dominant over undyed juveniles. Oh,
That kind of cuts the other direction, right, Peter?
yeah. That just tripped me up. I'm like, well, so if I got an older guy, like I thought this guy was going from, you're getting older, you're getting stronger, more experience. But now we got these two juveniles, me and some other guy. I faked this guy out by dyeing my rope, and now
Uh-huh.
I'm better. I
Yeah.
don't know.
Now
I
we're
don't
cutting in
know.
the other direction. We seem to be supporting Rover almost.
Yeah, that's confusing, but okay,
Yeah, I mean
sounds
this,
good.
but we do. I mean, this is a very long sentence, right? If we
Yeah,
go to the front of that sentence, it told us that there are indicators that plumage probably does signal broad age-related differences. But it sounds almost like this is cutting in the other direction. It looks like the
yeah,
author's about to respond.
okay.
However, the haired sparrows' age-related plumage differences do not signal the status of individual birds within an age class, and thus cannot properly be included under the term status signaling.
Okay, so I think this goes back to rejecting the guy's hypothesis because he was talking about the Harris sparrows to prove his hypothesis back in the second paragraph.
Mm-hmm.
And then after that, age-related plumage differences do not signal the status of individual birds. So now this guy is saying age-related. So that's kind of going back to that second point he just made in the previous sentence, saying how these two guys the same age, if you just dyed it, you're
Mm-hmm.
considered stronger. So he or she is saying that now, in terms of age, it cannot be properly included under static signal because he just showed that you can be the same age, but just dye your throat is
Yeah.
kind of what I'm seeing here. And that's why he's saying now age class cannot be properly included under the status signal.
I think that's right. I think they're saying that Harris, like this, if you're in the same age class, the plumage differences don't give you a change in the status. Therefore, you can't use that under status signaling. It doesn't work.
Yeah. And would it make sense that I'm kind of getting the author's evidence there when he explained the dying?
I think that that's connected. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, that's kind of how I put two and two together. Like the age doesn't matter because the juveniles are dying just to get higher status anyways than an
Yeah,
adult, I think it said. Yeah.
right. Because when we died the juvenile birds, it was like it
Oh,
was
look.
still hang on. Yeah, no, I think that's
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Over
yeah.
undied juveniles. Juveniles die to resemble adults are
Oh,
dominant
right, because
over
but we're
all.
talking about the same age group. We would
Yeah.
need a juvenile
Yeah.
versus a juvenile in
Yeah.
order to
Yeah.
be able to make that comparison. Yes. Okay.
Yeah.
It took a minute.
But got
Who
it.
wants to wrap up with me? Peter, you did a fantastic job. Thank you. Someone that hasn't volunteered before, maybe? Might be fun. I promise I'll be nice. No?
I can.
Yeah? Um, how do I pronounce your name? I want to make sure I get it right. Chica?
Yep.
Awesome. How are you doing?
Pretty good. How are you?
Not bad. You ready?
Yep.
The best evidence for status signaling is from the greater titmouse. I think the author's about to support this. Just doesn't want us to use maybe the birds as the evidence.
Yeah, I think that they're like trying to kind of pivot to like their, I guess, hypothesis of like why this might be a better answer.
Yep. Experiments show a strong correlation between the width of the black breast plumage stripe and status as measured by success in aggressive interactions.
So I guess like it's kind of supporting the previous sentence, I'm guessing. I'm not really sure what a greater titmouse is. But
I
yeah.
mean, I'm thinking it's just a type of mouse.
Okay.
Yeah. But I'm not sure why they're bringing in the plumage again, unless it's a bird. I don't think it's a bird. That wouldn't make any sense. But they're saying that there is a strong correlation between like how big the stripe is, maybe, and the status that comes from that, or how, not even how big it is, how wide it is versus how the status. And here's the thing, guys, I don't actually know what's happening here, but I don't have to. I just have to keep in mind that I'm a little bit confused about why they're bringing up a mouse and then talking about the width of the plumage on a bird. I'm confused, but I think as long as you understand what you're confused about, you can keep going. What do you think, Chica?
Yeah, I think maybe we can keep going and then it might bring it all together in the next sentence, but if not, I don't know, then we can stop and figure it
Yeah,
out.
we'll
Yeah.
we'll bomb that bridge when we get there. Got it. An analysis of factors likely to be associated with breast stripe width, so things that we've already talked about, right? Like age and sex, but also like the wing length, the body weight, all these sort of factors that have to do with the width of it, has demonstrated social status to be the only variable that correlates with stripe width when other variables are held constant.
Okay. So I guess, yeah, I'm reading the chat and I think maybe people are thinking that the titmouse is like a type of bird, so maybe that's like an example.
Yeah,
Or,
this doesn't make any sense, but I think you guys are right. I think by the end of this paragraph, though, we'd be like, okay, no, I don't think they're talking about mice. I think they're talking about an actual bird.
yeah, which kind of makes sense if you think about it then, because it's kind of using that as an example, and in that like case study, like the ones
Yeah.
with like the wider width like stripe
Yeah.
kind of support like what the author is saying a little bit.
Yeah. But what's the point here, Chica? I think we understand, like, okay, so we're talking about a bird for sure. And what do you think the author is being, what do you think the author is getting at here? Like, why is this the better example?
It's saying that like instead of like it being like solely based on like signs or like physical characteristics, the social science kind of or like social status plays a bigger role in like why other birds may be intimidated by them or not, or like
well, we're talking within the same bird population.
or yeah, or why in within the flock these people may hold their social status better because, or hold on, sorry, or these birds because the only variable is the stripe width, so like that is what holds their status versus like them being able to fight or
Right, exactly.
yeah.
I think that's totally correct. I think the Harris sparrows are, when you adjust for everything else, the correlation between the dark throat and the status is like it doesn't exist. But whereas here, when you hold for everything else, the width of the stripe and the status are like definitely have a strong correlation. Awesome. Let's wrap up here. An ingenious experiment provided further evidence for status signaling in the greater titmouse. Terribly named. One of the 3 stuffed titmouse dummies was mounted on a feeding tray. When a live bird approached, the dummy was turned on by radio control to face the bird and present its breast stripe in display.
So I guess it's kind of breaking down like part of the experiment to like prove its point further of how the width of the like breast display helps, or well, we don't know yet what it will do, but like it's showing
We kind
that
of know.
yeah, we can assume, but yeah.
Yeah. And you guys might have noticed, like, Ollie, you just read 3 sentences in a row. Why'd you do that? It's because it's just setting up an experiment. I don't have to freak myself out trying to understand all the details, but I get it, right? There's a bird, it's a remote controlled, and it's going to see the stripe at the size of the stripe. When presented with a dummy having a narrower breast stripe than their own, birds approached closely and behaved aggressively. However, when presented with a dummy having a broader breast stripe than their own, live birds acted submissive and did not approach. Damn.
So it's like further confirming what they kind of said in the previous paragraph, and kind of what we were assuming going into this. So yeah.
Yep. You did a great job, Chica. Thank you.
Thank you.
What do we think? Do we want to do a main point exercise for this, or are we feeling good? All right, thumbs up if you want to do a main point exercise. Thumbs up. Oh, not very many. Okay, I see a couple of you guys. I think we have it in the other direction. I'm going to send you off to do it, but I do want to ask you to think about, why'd they write this? What did they want us to know? Okay, keep that in mind. Good luck. There's about 7 questions. I'm going to give you guys about 10 minutes to work on those and fill out the poll I publish as you come back in. Good luck. take another minute or so. All right, fill out the poll if you haven't already so I can get a good understanding of what it is we want to chat about. Looks like number 18 and 20 are for sure winners, but we've got a couple of votes on a few different ones. Okay, keep voting if you haven't already so that I can get a good understanding here. Okay, so we'll just go in order and then I'll just pick the ones that seem to have the highest number of votes, and then I'm happy to circle around and talk about any of the other ones. So we'll start off with number 16. All right. The author refers to the fact that adult Harris sparrows are usually dark-throated in order to do which one of the following? I will always look back at these sort of highlight questions, right, where they like are talking about a specific part, and I'm just gonna like quickly skim over. So this is where they were kind of just saying like, hey, Rower doesn't know what he's talking about with respect to these like sparrows, right? He was like, hey, it seems like they win, but if you adjust for age, it's like, well, it's probably the age that's doing it. That's what I'm pretty sure that me and Peter talked about when we were reading this part. So why'd they bring it up? To talk about how the Harris birds are like not a great example of this. A, support the conclusion that plumage variation among Harris sparrows probably does not signal individual status. Almost word for word what I just said, right? It's just about how the author was annoyed, like, hey, you're using this example that when you adjust for age basically goes away. B, argue that plumage variation among Harris sparrows helps to confirm the status signaling hypothesis. This is the exact opposite, right? This is saying like, hey, the Harris sparrows help you figure out that the status signaling is it like actually works. That was different. That was the bird that came afterwards. C, argue that plumage variation indicate that in light of plumage variation patterns among Harris sparrows, can they indicate anything to us? I don't really think so, except maybe age, right? They can't give you information about the status. The status signaling hypothesis should probably be modified. Could we ever pick this answer choice? Whatever the question is, we could never do that because the author never affirmatively told us that something is wrong with the status signaling hypothesis. They just told us like Rower is looking for evidence in the wrong place. That doesn't mean anything at all about the actual hypothesis. It just means that the hypothesis can't be confirmed in this particular way. Questions about B and C? It looks like these are the more popular wrong answer choices. Okay. Demonstrate that Harris sparrows are the most appropriate subjects for the study of status signaling among birds. Exact opposite, right? They're bad candidates for this kind of study. E, suggests that the signaling of age-related differences in status is widespread among birds that form flocks. We talked about flocks at the top, and then we kind of like didn't. Although I would assume, given that the introduction was about flocks, like these sparrows are probably like flocking birds, right? But that doesn't mean we can ever say anything about age-related differences across like birds that flock. I don't know I can't say that with any kind of conviction. Questions about number 16? All right. Looks like the next winner here is number 18. Which one of the following best describes the organization of the passage? I almost never think about organization on a passage, just like really never, unless they ask me to think about it. And then I'll be like, all right, if you're making me, I will. So what did they do here? They first gave us, when I was reading with Charles, all we got was context, right? Like, hey, this is the world I'm about to drop you into, right? So they gave us some context. And then they were like, well, this context has something to do with this hypothesis. And they gave us like a rundown of why one scientist's version is actually bad. And then they were like, oh, but this other one works. That's what I'm looking for. A hypothesis is introduced and studies relevant to the hypothesis are discussed and evaluated. I don't like it. I feel like it's vague. I want it to be like hypothesis. Here's the bad example. Here's the good example. I want that. That's what I want. B, a natural phenomenon is presented and several explanations for the phenomenon are examined in detail. Did we ever get explanations for the hypothesis? No, we just got, hey, do they manifest in this group of birds or do they manifest in that group of birds? That doesn't mean you're explaining the hypothesis. That just means you're showing where you can confirm it or not confirm it. C, behavior is described. Was behavior described? No. I need a hypothesis here. Possible underlying causes for the behavior are reported. What causes? Like evolution? And the likelihood of each cause is assessed. No. Likelihood, did we ever get percentages like, hey, this is like, this cause has a 50% chance of being correct? This just has a bunch of buzzwords in it that don't actually mean anything remotely close to what the passage was telling me about. D, a scientific conundrum is explained and the history of, oh my God, the history of the issue is recounted. When did we go through a timeline? No. E, a scientific theory is outlined. Theory being outlined? I want a hypothesis. Just give me a hypothesis. And opinions for and against its validity. Okay, E is wrong for the exact same reason that, which one is it? C, I think, is wrong. We never talked about the causes of the hypothesis. First of all, this isn't even a hypothesis, it's a theory. But we never learned about why the, what hypothesis is it? The status signaling hypothesis. We never learned about whether it's valid or not. We're just talking about, is it supported or is it not supported by a particular bird species? As well as experiments supporting each side are compared. In order for E to be correct, I need a theory, which I don't have. I need for and against the theory, which I don't have. And I need experiments on each side of the theory, which I do not have. So I hate all of them. But I definitely felt like my rage was far more on the second half of the answer choices I looked at. So I must have missed something in either A or B. A hypothesis is introduced. Okay, now I do like the word hypothesis in there. At least it's not a theory. And studies relevant to the hypothesis. So we had two studies. We had the sparrows and then we had the mice birds. Those are studies that are relevant to the hypothesis, are discussed and evaluated. Yeah, they were evaluated, right? Because the Harris sparrows were bad and the mice birds were good. Okay, I was basically too aggressive with A, but I hate everything else and A basically fits. I have each of the things that it's talking about. Questions about 18? Okay. I might circle back to 17. That's got a few votes as well, but let's do number 20. The passage, what's the difference between a hypothesis and a theory? That's a great question. A hypothesis is like, well, we can actually just use the example from this passage. So the hypothesis would be like, hey, there's this sort of guess, right? This very sort of educated guess. And we're talking about a scientific guess, not like, us guessing what the weather is like, different. We're talking about like a science-based guess where scientists think that there's a phenomenon out there and they're trying to do work to prove it. A theory, on the other hand, and correct me if there are any STEM majors in the room that are like, Allah, you are talking out of your ass. Correct me if you want. A theory is far closer to a certainty than a hypothesis is, right? Hypotheses tend to be a little bit less sure, and they also tend to be a lot more narrow. A theory is like, the theory of like a lot of Einstein stuff are just theories, right? So yeah, I think that's a good way to put it too. Anyone can bring up a hypothesis, but you might need to have credentials to establish a theory. Oh, there's synonyms in the dictionary. Well, that's fun. But generally though, because the dictionary won't tell you like all of the meanings. When we're talking about science, a hypothesis is fundamentally different from a theory. So in science, difference between theory and hypothesis. In scientific reasoning, a hypothesis is constructed before any applicable research has done. A theory, on the other hand, is supported by evidence. So yeah, that's exactly right. A hypothesis is kind of like the bare minimum of what you do if you're trying to prove something. A theory is much more, you can be much more confident in presenting a theory because you've got like a lot more to back it up. All right, number 20, the passage, of course, the passage suggests that among birds that form flocks, okay, so all the birds we're talking about, a bird of high status is most likely to have which one of the following? Wait, what? What do I know about birds that form flocks? I know almost nothing. That's the key to this question. If you got this one wrong, and I'm not even looking at the answer choices yet, if you got this one wrong, you were probably thinking about the birds they talked about. But birds that form flocks, that's such a massive number of birds. I feel like every bird is in a group. Like what birds are by themselves? Like ostriches maybe, but I feel like they have flocks too. All right, I know nothing. I can barely answer this question. So I'm looking for like a weak answer that has something to do with that general stuff that we talked about with Charles. All they told us was like, hey, they form this sort of like ranked system where they beat each other up. And the better they get at beating each other up, the higher they go up in the rankings. That's all I know. I do not know anything else. So do I know that the bird of a high status has dark throat plumage? No, unless we're talking about the sparrows. No idea. Greater than average body weight? Who knows? Maybe we're thinking of like Muhammad Ali, right? We need something small and fast. For all we know, these are birds. They barely weigh anything. C, offspring of high status? Maybe, but how the hell am I going to be able to say that? I have no idea. Strong fighting ability? Yeah, because the only general information we have about these kinds of birds is that when they fight, their ranking goes up, which gives them a high status. And strong fighting ability would obviously seem to have something to do with you being able to beat other birds up. E, frequent injuries? I don't know. That would seem to go against the point. Okay, this was like the most popular one for today that y'all wanted me to talk about. Questions about this one? Okay, number 21. Which one of the following can be inferred about Paris sparrows from the passage? Very little. They didn't tell us a lot. I'm looking for something I can definitely 100% say about the sparrows. A, among Harris sparrows, plumage differences signal individual status only within age groups. Remember when we adjusted for age, nothing happened, right? When we adjusted for age, it was like they're basically the plumage difference did not matter. B, among Harris sparrows, adults have priority of access to food over juveniles. What do we know about the adults? The adults we know when we were reading with Peter, we figured out that the adults are probably stronger and more experienced. And given that we know that birds that live in flocks have this status system, because they're stronger and more experienced at fighting, they probably have a higher status. What does that mean? That means that they have, according to the first paragraph that we read with Charles, that means they have priority access to food over the ones that are not as strong or have experience with fighting. This is one of those questions, and this happens, I would say, once or twice a section, where the question isn't directly from the passage. Sorry, the answer choice is not directly from the passage. Nowhere in this passage did they, word for word or in any synonym, ever tell you, hey, among the sparrows, the adults have a better access to food and juveniles, food over juveniles. All right, they never told you that. But sometimes, similar to analogy questions, we have to do that kind of work. But I want to be clear here, we're not taking a leap away from the passage or not even a step away from the passage. We're like one tiny degree away from the passage just to do the logic, and then we're back in the passage, right? It's kind of like just putting the facts together to make this make sense. We're not doing something special. Peter?
Yeah, so you mean like putting the facts like, because in the passage it just say like in the first paragraph that if you have higher status, that means you have better access to resources. It directly says that in the first paragraph. Then when you can just easily assume that since it's a flock bird for the Harrow sparrows, that they have the same quality as saying if you have higher status, you're gonna get better access to food. And they said that adults have higher priority.
Right.
Flocks.
That's what I mean.
Yeah.
So it's those like little facts that you're putting together. It's not even like an LR question, right? Where you're like doing the work of doing the logic. It's more like gather the facts and be like, what is this pointing towards? If I told you to like go get some leaves from outside, go pluck some grass, go and, I don't know, get a friend's Celtics jersey. You put them all together, what color is it? It's green. I never told you that the stuff was green, but when you pull it all together, it's all green. It's kind of like that more than it is logic, right? You're just pulling the facts together and going, oh shit, yeah, right? You're not really doing any of the work. It's just allowing yourself to pull them together. Yeah. So that's why I'm not even saying you're taking a step away from the passage. It's not. You're still comfortably within the domain of the passage. It's just that they're disparate elements sometimes that you have to connect. I think number 21 is a good example of one where you're like, they never said that though. And you're right, they didn't, but they did. They said it almost like by omission. C, among Harris sparrows, juveniles with relatively dark plumage have status equal to that of adults with relatively light plumage. Could never make that claim. I don't know that at all. We don't know if it's like a one-to-one type of comparison like that. Juvenile Harris sparrows engage in aggressive interaction more frequently than do adult Harris sparrows. No, because I don't know that. Right? These answer choices like C, D, even A are leaps and bounds away from the passage. They're not within the realm of what we're talking about. E, Harris sparrows engage in aggressive interaction less frequently than do greater tip. No, I don't know that. I don't know a comparison in between groups of birds. So that's number 21. I'm assuming y'all want to talk about number 17. Do we want to talk about 17? There's a few votes on number 17. Speak now or forever hold your peace. For number 17. Okay, well, I think, okay, somebody's direct messaged me. I'm just gonna go through it real quick. Which one of the following, if true, would most seriously undermine the validity of the results results of the experiment discussed in the last paragraph? Well, something that would be a shit show for that would be like maybe, I don't know, the birds can't see the width of the stripe or something like that, right? That would be a disaster. They'd be like, oh, okay, this has not got nothing to do with the stripe. A, the live birds all came from different flocks. No, I don't think that mattered. We're talking about generally across the species, right? We're not talking about individual flocks. B, the physical characteristics of the stuffed bunnies, good job, Allah, stuffed dummies varied in ways other than just breast stripe width. What? Don't do that. You can't. That's like the one thing you learn in 4th grade science. You can't change multiple variables. You've got to change one of them and then compare them across to see. Because if they were like making the ones that had the larger width, like bigger birds, then we're screwed. We can't make that conclusion. That would be devastating. C, no live juvenile birds were included in the experiment. I don't think I care. We never made the distinction between age in the second bird population. D, the food placed in the feeding tray was not the kind of food normally eaten by them in the wild. I don't think I care about that either, because it would have been the same across the way. So it's about the interaction between them. I don't think I care about the food. Even the live birds that acted aggressively did not actually physically attack the stuffed dummies. That doesn't matter. They acted aggressively. I think that's all I need. I hope that helped. All right. I'm going to close it out there. I will stick around to answer questions since we're ending a little bit early. Thank you guys. And thanks to Peter, to Charles, and to Chica for reading. I appreciate you guys. Maybe I'll see some of you in Plateau Pulverizer. Otherwise, have a great weekend. Happy Halloween.